Let's go over real quick. We've covered a lot of the creation evolution stuff, so we're going to wrap that up. There's obviously so much more I could say about it. We may cover a few more details if we get into design again, but I think if we can summarize a lot of what's said and a lot of the misconceptions that you guys are going to run to and potentially fall into the trap of. When we hear the term evolution, we have like an instinctive response of like, bad, evil, okay. I liked the way Jonathan Wells put it in the last little chunk of that video where he was talking, like there are different types of science. There is the basic science, which is seeking after truth empirically. The term empirically means we're doing experiments, we're observing all that good stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. And when we do that, we do see empirically that there is such a thing as evolution, but again, it's on the micro scale. It's change within a species, it's change, physical changes, some other adaptations, all right? We see that all the time. No problem with it. So when you say like, I don't believe in evolution, that's imprecise. You should really tell them like, I don't believe that things change into new species. Even that's a little less precise because again, species has more of a meaning to it too. So when you say, I don't believe like a dog came from a non-dog, okay, that's fine. You still believe in evolution, you just don't believe in macroevolution. So we are looking at it saying, we believe this, we don't believe that. Okay? So, will we do that?
Because it's just a theory.
Yeah. Throw a bottle at your head. So again, my goal is to give you guys some of the things that you should, basically arguments you shouldn't use, and just some evidences that are good to use. So anyway, there you go. Let's wrap up this information. So we are on page 6 or 7 in the notes.
7.
So again, creation stuff. We already covered this, but I'm just going to show it to you in the notes. As we see the two creation accounts, the first one is chronological. The second one seems to be more of a, from Adam's point of view, or focused in on humans. Again, you will note that these are the generations of, specifically there in verse 4, Toledot, okay? Thank you for not making me ask. All right, again, it likely seems to be, it's not literally a signature, because obviously it's not God, like, I wrote this. Same with, Adam and other people. I don't think it's the actual person who is writing it down and then handing that document of papers to the next person and the next person, and then Moses just staples it all together. I don't think that's what's happening, but it seems to be that type of idea, okay? So it's like, hey, God's part is done, and so there's like a signature to sign off, and then when Adam's section is done, then you see another signature to wrap that up, and then it moves into a new section. So pay attention to, as you're reading through Genesis, these are the generations of, these are the generations of. So Toledot, Toledot, Toledot. Okay, again, if you want more information on that, I have this book in my office for those of you who care. The Modern Creation Trilogy, Volume 1, pages 15 to 17 has more information on that. Moving on. Okay, some chapter 2. Chapter 2, like I said, is following kind of the theme of Genesis, where it's introducing all these new things. So it's introducing marriage, it's introducing the naming of the animals, it's introducing women. So all of that is being introduced to the account. We already ran into Adam, so that's why man isn't being introduced in chapter 2. There you go. Adam has brought all the animals. Again, note the restarting of creation. It's not a recreation. It's just basically telling it from another point of view. Adam names the animals. God makes women. And then there you go. All right? So that's what we've already kind of covered. So most of this extra stuff should be relatively new. But any questions so far on previous lecture stuff or this stuff that I just reviewed? Okay. There you go. All right. Now, first of all, what we get as a build-up to what we're going to start talking about here is God gives the warning. He says, do not eat of the tree. Now, what do you notice Adam does with it that God didn't do? So God apparently at some point said, do not eat of the tree. But what does Adam or Eve, one of the two, what did they add in?
Let me see.
All right, so here it is. So Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. And so God commanded man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt what?
Not eat.
You shalt not eat of it, for in the day thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Okay, so if we compare 2 verse 17, God is telling them, do not eat of this tree, because the day you eat of it you will surely die. We've explained that, but that's what he says. Look at chapter 3.
Unless you touch it, that's what she added.
All right, what did Eve add to the discussion?
You can't touch it.
Okay, so Eve says, don't eat, and also says,
Don't touch.
don't touch. Now, did God say that?
No.
No. Nothing in what God said to Adam at all even hinted that you can't touch the thing. Just said, don't eat of it.
Play baseball with it.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, yeah. Well, what do you... Let's just play a fun little mental game. Where on earth did the don't touch it come from?
It's more of a precautionary, so you don't eat it.
Okay, so where do you...
It's an extra layer of like stuff, like kind of like mental guard.
But why would she add that if she didn't know?
So where do you think that came from then?
Humans misinterpreting.
Okay, but how do you misinterpret don't eat of it as don't touch it?
Translation.
I think they were speaking the same language. What do you think? If you were looking at this account and going, this, like the day before, or who knows how long it took, definitely was within that year for various reasons we can talk about.
It could have been like they knew it was the one thing that God told them not to do, so they knew that there was some sort of they knew that restriction, so it was like the only sort of wrong that they knew of at that time, so they just added an extra barrier, and sometimes it could be
Yeah.
even if it wasn't what he said, it's still okay, if we're not supposed to eat that, then we shouldn't really touch it either.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty reasonable excuse. You'll see this later on when the Israelites are encamped before Mount Sinai. Moses basically says, God, this is God's commandment. Anything that touches this mountain will have to be put to death. And so basically it's the idea of well, you better put a fence around that mountain to keep anything from accidentally touching it. And the idea is you put up a barricade to keep yourself from accidentally, because touching the mountain was death. But if you accidentally tripped, it's really nice to have a wall or something to kind of keep you from accidentally falling into it. And you stay back. So I really think that what you've got here is basically the first time of someone saying, you know what, if we don't touch it, we're probably not going to risk eating it. So why don't we just agree not to touch it? Now, whether Adam just kind of came up and said, hey, Eve, don't touch it either. And so she just took it as God's command and was like, oh, we can't even touch it. I don't know. I don't know where, other than them setting up an extra barricade for themselves, I don't know where else that would have come from. But God clearly said, don't eat. Eve misinterpreted, or Adam told her a little bit of extra, or they agreed, and they said, we're not going to eat of it, but we're not even going to touch it. Now, it would have been really nice if she had listened to that, because as you see, it says this. It says, now the serpent, which there's some interpretations of that too, if you care. The serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. He said unto the woman, yea, hath God said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. Now, in a way, the serpent was right, and here's how we can make that thing. They didn't die immediately, but they were as good as dead from that point on. So when they heard surely die, they probably interpreted it as we do. Oh, it's like an instant death. Like the moment it touches your mouth, it's like, Pwah! What God is saying is, you will begin the process of death. Spiritually, you will be dead. So yes, you are surely dying. But the snake's like, nah. And I wonder how Eve felt after she took that first bite and was like, still alive. The serpent was right. I don't know. But once you walk down that road, there's no going back. All right. So you see it, and God says this, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, that your eyes shall be opened, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. So up until this point, they theoretically knew, like, oh, there is this thing called death that God warned us of, but we don't know what that is. There is, good and wrong choices. Obviously they understand that, but they don't know it. There's an ignorance there. There's an innocence. And so basically, Satan is looking at them going, God's just trying to keep you from the good stuff. He wants you to be ignorant. He doesn't want you to know these things. And that's the seduction of it, because it's like, well, that'd be really nice to know. I would like to know these things. And so the serpent gets them to go for it. Look what it says, and the woman saw the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, a tree desired to make one wise. So there's multiple reasons why she decides to make this choice. She took of the fruit thereof, she did eat. And then, look what it says here, and she gave also unto her husband with her. So it seems, based on that wording, that Adam was nearby. So it's not like, I don't know what was going through his head. I don't know why he didn't step in and I don't like where this conversation's going. But,
Because he was there doesn't mean he was paying attention.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, he is still a guy. So yeah, Adam was probably just like, la la. He's like, wait, what? What did you just do?
Wait, what?
No. Now, the truth is, the Bible will lay it out. The Bible will lay out that the woman was deceived, so she was tricked into it, but Adam chose to do it. So, that's just something to keep in mind too. It's not saying that every woman is stupid and every man is, no. Because if you go that way, then every man is just absolutely terrible. So, I guess maybe that's the truth. But anyway, so you get this idea that the woman was deceived by this. She was tricked into doing it, and then the man had a willing choice in the matter and went with it. Right? It says, and the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. So there you go. All right, so God warns Adam not to do this. And again, we do not know what fruit it was. That's not the point. Okay, so as you say, it's like, oh, it's the apple. Okay, whatever.
Because Adam's apple.
Adam's apple, yeah. And sometimes they're like, well, it got stuck in his throat a little bit when he swallowed it. And so that's where, whatever. There's some really stupid ideas. There's even one theory that it was a metaphor for sex. And you're like, really? Because God didn't command them to be fruitful and multiply. So, I mean, clearly.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's some people have a theory that the serpent was this angelic being, which it very well could have been. I mean, it's probably Satan himself in serpentine form. But there's some who Eve had sex with the angel, and so that was the actual sin.
Where does it say that?
Yeah, it's you will find a lot of people who theorize stuff, and it's just kind of awkward. And you're like, why can't we just go with the fact that this is some type of it's a fruit that God told them not to eat, and they ate, and it was just a simple test. Do we have to get awkward about this? But anyway, we don't know what kind of fruit it was. We don't even know what kind of snake this was. All right, but it's clear that if it was an actual biological snake, it was a little different than what our modern day snakes are because of the fact that it talks.
And it no longer has legs.
Yeah, nothing in the text tells us that it would have had legs. All that we can presume with that is it had something that would keep it upright, because later on God says you're going to basically drag your face in the dirt for the rest of your life. So that's where some people have come up with the idea of maybe it had legs, and then God knocked the legs off. The text doesn't say that. In fact, some people entirely spiritualized the serpent, because if you look at some of the meanings of the words like seraphim and cherubim and some of these languages, depending on which root word you're coming from, it could have the idea of serpent. Yeah. So there seems to be an implication that some of these spiritual beings have a serpent-like appearance because of the root of what the word like seraph and some of these things come from. So they believe that this serpent, that's where the idea that this serpent is more than just a snake comes from, that it could have been Satan in like a serpentine form. So that's just a little bit of backstory of why a lot of this tradition has arisen about this story. If you read the strict text, you got some sort of serpent creature who is seducing Eve to do wrong. But again,
I feel like it's an actual serpent.
Yeah.
It basically tells them he'll be like the cattle.
Yeah, exactly. So the ways to walk away from this is it is either a literal serpent that is possessed or something like that, and so God curses the whole kit and caboodle of it. Little worm. That would fit with the eating dirt, because it literally does. But there's clearly a picture God wants them to walk away from with this, where he says, you are going to be dragging your face in the dirt from here on out, symbolically, like you're going to be crawling. And he's basically saying, like, when you see a serpent, this is what you're going to remember. So there seems to be some change to the creative order because of what this serpent did, and it kind of symbolically carries on to the rest of its offspring, so to speak. So
The worm was in the apple they ate.
and it brings it full circle.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think it was a pomegranate. I don't know. So like I said, we don't know much more than what the text says, but as you compare to meanings of words and things, that's where you get some of this other stuff. The fall, Satan gets Eve to doubt. Now, the text does not say it's Satan. The reason we assume it's Satan is because Satan is constantly compared to serpent-like forms. So he'll be called the dragon, that old serpent. You know, there's the Bible will reference things to kind of keep making us think back to this story. So one of the things that'll happen is it'll say, like, Satan is the father of lies, you know, and he tempts Adam, like Adam and Eve get tempted, but then later on when Satan is tempting Jesus, it's kind of a mirror image of what the serpent did to Adam and Eve. And so it's not too much of a stretch to say they're probably the same being doing this, you know. So those are just some of the reasons. So that's why we would say Satan, even though the text itself does not. Okay. You knoweth you shall be as gods is an important little phrase here. It's kind of that idea of like, hey, you're going to have this divine knowledge. You're going to be like these, you know, the Elohim. You shall be as them. Okay. She takes the fruit. She's attracted by the beauty and wisdom that it can give. She eats it. Later on, you're going to see the Bible expound on this type of ideas where it's the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Those images are going to come back, but you can see them played out here. Okay, Moses is including this as a reminder to Israel to trust God, because that's what Satan tries to get them to not do. And so they will be tempted by Satan. They will be tempted by their flesh. They will be tempted by foreign gods. They'll be tempted by all sorts of things to basically say, don't listen to God. And he's just reminding them, if you go that route, this is what's going to happen to you. And again, we trust God, and in so doing, we're believing that he's a good God. When we deny that, we are basically saying, I don't believe you're good, so therefore I'm going to do my own thing because it's better for me that way. And you really think, because Eve says, God tells us not to do this, and Satan is basically casting doubt on God's goodness in his response. So just some things to keep in mind as we deal with this idea. Paul will recount in the epistles that she was deceived, but that Adam wasn't. And so that's just something to remember as well. Eve did not, like, when I say willingly, understand it's she did not go out with the intent to sin. She got tricked into it. Whereas Adam, once he saw Eve fall, he made the choice to disobey. So there are different levels of sin, I believe, in that there are people who are tricked into it. They just don't know any better. And then there are people who intentionally fall. That goes back to our discussion the other day of, you have the simple man who's just tricked. He doesn't know any better. And then you have the fool or the scorner who they may know what they're doing and they either choose to do wrong or they're vindictively choosing. So just kind of take a lot of those other principles we've laid out already and start slotting them in, and you'll start understanding a little bit more. Okay.